Hello and welcome to Sumo Digital here at Sheffield. We're here to play some Crackdown 3 with a few members of the dev team. Hello.
Hello.
We're here with Steve and with Rich.
Hi.
Could you both give us a quick introduction? Steve, you give us an introduction.
Hello, I am Steve Lycett. I am a piece of the furniture in Sheffield. I've been here for 21 years. In this particular game, I was Senior Executive Producer, which is quite a fancy job title. I'm now Franchise Development Director, so that's an even fancier job title.
Could you tell us, for everyone that doesn't know, what a Senior Executive Producer does?
So broadly, I am given the overview of the project, so I'm responsible for it all. That's how it works. I'm the person who takes all the blame and all the misery. Let me refresh that. So I get an entire team of people, we get a set of time, and it's my job to take that time and those people and to make a video game, to get from beginning to end. For we might have nothing at the start, maybe somebody's written down an idea or a design, and we have to develop that, and then we have to get to the end where we've gone, here's a full completed video game and it's done. And I've got to work out how we get from that to that and make sure that it happens.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rich, could you introduce yourself, please?
Of course, yeah. I'm Richard Jordan. I'm not quite as old a piece of furniture as Steve. I've been here around 16 years. I started on Crackdown as a concept artist, and as I progressed through the game, I also progressed and became an art director and looked after all of the art on the project, working directly with the concept team and working with Microsoft as well, with their art directors too.
Fantastic. So could you tell us, I'm sure some of us may know, but what does a concept artist do?
A concept artist is the person who works very closely with the designers to figure out what an idea is. So when an idea comes to us, usually bubbling up from a designer, we want a gun, we want a character. It's a really loose idea and we've got to bring that to life visually. This is what it's going to look like. Sometimes it's just straight, quick little idea. Other times we have to get into the nuts and bolts and really show how that weapon works so that we can see if it'll work, fit in the hands correctly, all of that business.
Fantastic, thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to first chat a bit more to Steve, right? And Rich is going to play the game, so we're going to watch Rich play the game whilst we talk a bit to Steve, and then what we'll do is we'll swap it around a bit, and then we'll have Rich answer some questions and Steve play the game. So I don't know if you want to get started.
I'm sticking with Terry.
Sticking with
Nice.
Sticking with Terry.
You've got to stick with Terry.
Nice, fantastic.
Yeah, let's go.
It's good. So, you said to us that you were a senior executive producer on Crackdown 3. So could you tell us a little bit more? You talked about, times and getting times and people. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your day-to-day was like?
Yes, totally. So all games go through kind of a set process. You have the bit at the start, which is a kind of a pre-production, and at that point, it's brilliant because everything's possible. You basically work out what the format of your game is going to be, what kind of set pieces you want to have, what it's going to look like, and everything's incredible. It's like, yeah, we've got all the time in the world, we can do whatever we like. And slowly you start to work out what that is and define it, and then you go, right, now we'll try some things out, we'll prototype, we'll make sure we can get a character which runs and jumps and shoots and things like that. And you boil it down to the point where you go, right, we now know what the game is, and at that point you should have a plan, and that's something I will be responsible for putting together. So I work with artists, designers, programmers, all the kind of people who make the game. And we get to that end of pre-production and we go, right, now we know what it is, we know how it's going to take, all we've got to do is actually do it. So at that point, we will write a thing we call a set of milestones, sounds exciting, which is just a document which says, every so often, every 6 weeks, we're going to do these things, and then we'll do these things, we'll do these things, and it's a plan which takes us through to a kind of version of the game you can play all the way through, but it's not finished. And we've been through it. Have you just fallen off? So once you've got your plan of how you're going to do it and you start executing it, you get to the point where you've got a finished-ish version of the game, but the problem is it'll be full of bugs. So your saves might not work, or you shoot something and it won't work the way you want it to be. And also, it's like you've made a movie at that point. You've got a whole game, but there might be bits which don't feel quite right, and it doesn't have that kind of thing that you would actually go in for. So then you go into the last phase, which is kind of post-production. There, you're effectively editing your game to get the game you really wanted, not the game you've got at the moment, and you also are working for it to get rid of all the bugs and all the problems and like trying to refine it and polish it up. And eventually, at the end of that, you've got the actual game that everybody sees. But each one of these phases takes quite a long time. So the pre-production might be a year. Your production, I think on this was about 3 years, right, give or take. And at the end of it, we spent a good year bug fixing it because when you play Crackdown, it's effectively open world. Everything affects everything else. If the guns don't shoot the enemies well enough, the game's too difficult and then you get swamped. If the game's too easy, it's not much fun to play because you're just kind of walking through it. But you've got traffic going around the city, pedestrians running around the city. All this stuff has to work together in conjunction. So we knew it was going to take a long time to kind of wrap up and edit at the end. And all the way through this, I'm the one who's basically making sure we're on track, everyone's doing what they need to do. I'm listening to feedback from art, design, because art will be like, this needs to be prettier, and design are like, we need this to be bangier. So we're just trying to make sure that everyone's dreams and desires get taken on board, but because somebody is paying for it, we also need to be responsible for the budget. So it's my job to kind of sit there and go like, well, we can do this or we can do that, but we've only got this much time, let's have a work through. And I'll then work with the client, in this case it was Microsoft, to go like, do you want it to be shooty and bangy? Do you want to pay a little bit extra? We have those kind of conversations. So I'm part of it. You might go, well, that makes you in charge. Yeah, nominally, but we're here from a production point of view to look after the rest of the team to make sure all the creative people and the programmers and the artists, anybody who's involved in it, we're supporting them to make the best game possible. So we are sort of in charge, but we're there as a support role. So that's the big picture.
The big picture. You talked about, you know, being the challenges of kind of production and all that stuff. So what were the main challenges that you faced on Crackdown 3?
Wow, okay. So one of the interesting things is this was the first time a lot of us had kind of worked with Unreal, and we had to start with kind of a new version of Unreal. It was Unreal 4 at the time. And when you first get early versions of Unreal, they're not entirely finished.
That's fair.
That's fair, yeah. So there's a little bit of work in progress. And that's fine because a game will take many years to make and Unreal will get better over time. But we knew when we started looking at it, nobody had ever made kind of a large open world game in Unreal, at least not to our knowledge. So we were fine with running around, shooting, didn't really have any vehicle stuff or that. And we realised that this was going to need quite a lot of dynamic objects. You need things you can throw and you need to have interactions. So if you throw a car into some barrels, it's supposed to explode. And you want that kind of large-scale carnage. But we also knew we had to network that as well. So we had to be able to play this with up to, 2 players at the end, but it was 4 players at the start. And it all had to, from a player's perspective, just has to work. But Unreal didn't do that. That didn't exist, and so we had to write quite a large proportion of the engine to make that possible. So we had to write a system which deals with, we call them kind of props, but think barrels and crates is the typical thing, but make sure we could deal with like hundreds of those, and they would interact with each other, and that would network correctly, and it would all just work, and then do that in a massive open world, which wasn't really something Unreal did. So we knew we had to develop that, and that took quite a lot of time to get that up and working. And amusingly, by about 3 years into the game, Unreal started supporting that stuff, but we were already down the path, so we had to do it. So that was quite a big challenge. We'd also never done an open world game before. We understood Crackdown. When you see it, it's all about, finding the way you want to play the game, like working your way through the game. And so a lot of things we had to learn about, like how do you make the island's like 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. How are we going to populate that make that interesting? How are we going to have different zones and areas and make those rememberable for the player? So, you feel like you've moved to a different district or there's a more challenging set of enemies, and you kind of go like, oh, right, I've gone here now, but I'm not quite ready for it. And so that took a lot of experimentation. And then just deciding what the enemies were. So we had to go like, so who are you fighting? Sometimes you start with an idea of what you want the gameplay to be, and sometimes you start from an idea of what the story is. We had to kind of work both those out because this is the third game in the series, so do we reference previous games? Do we look back at that? Do we want to start and do something new and fresh? So all these things were like real big challenges at the start. We had to kind of figure this way through, and then again, that's the pre-production. Like, what is it? Why we're doing it? Where are we? What changes? And a lot of people have to work through all those details from a technical and artistic and a narrative point of view to make sure you understand it. And it changed constantly because, we'd sit down, we'd work with Dave Jones, we'd talk to Microsoft. We had so many different divisions who kind of came in and give input. Like Dave wanted to look at destruction, but that wasn't something for the campaign game. Microsoft wanted to be much more traditional kind of Crackdown, but we felt if we just did the same thing as what had already happened, it wasn't going to be something that players would, like, or you've got to do something new, you've got to innovate with a little bit. So all that took quite a bit of time. So most pre-productions, like I said, don't, you know, sometimes it can be short, 3 to 6 months, sometimes it takes time. This took a little bit longer. And although you should stop doing your pre-production when you start production, we actually still went back and refined things like the story and the artwork all the way through because, again, Microsoft wanted it to be the very best game possible, so they kept challenging us to go like, well, we think this should be, or we should bring in the right bosses, we should have these things, we want to have a robot dragon.
A robot dragon,
robot dragon. So all these things we went, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. So it developed and changed quite a lot over the time frame of the project. Like, the finished game is very, very different to what we started with and what we initially started with.
Yeah, we have enough content really for 2 games, at least in the concept phase. We had a whole different set of bad guys, a whole different sort of narrative to go with that too, as well as what you see in the final game.
Was totally different as well.
Yeah, the entire thing.
Robot dragon. I feel like we should explore this a bit more. Could you?
Spoilers, is it? I don't know. Well, I think no.
I doubt I'm going to get there in this run through, so feel free to get spoilery.
But you know, also, you know, I think we all deserve to know. So.
Well, yeah. So some things when you make video games, things crop up, and somebody at somewhere went, "We should have a robot dragon." I'm like, and at the first, I think we all looked at it and went like, "What, robot dragon? No, I'm not going to do that." But the more we talk about something, the more you kind of go like, well, actually, something about this is something quite interesting. Maybe we should make the robot dragon. And it ended up being something you see towards the back end of the game. But then you can't just have this thing turn up and it's like unexplained. You've got to kind of allude to it throughout the story. So, although it was this thing that shows up towards the back end of the game, we kind of allude to it. You come across them like building bits of it, like in places, and then you hear them talking about it, and then you kind of get a glimpse of it. And then right at the very end, it's like, oh, there is a robot dragon. It's not just what they're making up. So it was kind of added late in the game, I'm going to say.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, when we were looking towards we were trying to work out all the bosses and the narrative beats. And it was a joke to start with, and it got quite real.
Very, 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 very real.
Yeah, literally very real.
So you talked about bosses. Like, how do you go about like thinking about bosses and what players going to come across and everything like that?
Well, we worked a lot with narrative on that type of thing, so as well as the game progression. So, for instance, we've got Berg here. We knew we just wanted to introduce basic weapons, basic handling, that type of thing. So you can't be, we don't need a dragon to do that.
No.
So a lot of it is working with gameplay and design to just see what's appropriate. And then it's, we worked with Jason Statham, I think it was, to come up with some really cool narratives.
Do you mean Joe Statham?
Joe, yeah, not Jason.
Not Jason.
Yeah. I would have liked to work with him as well as Terry Crews. Yeah,
he wasn't available, unfortunately.
Sorry, Joe Statham.
Also, like the fact that you kind of, whilst you're talking, you are actually fighting a boss, and I just think that is some. You are talking through the process of creating bosses whilst fighting one, and that is some really good work.
Fighting leaves a lot to be desired here. I am struggling.
He's done a lot of running away, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a good example. So this boss you see is kind of the end of the tutorial. So you at this point, the whole point of Crackdown is the more you do something, the more powerful you become. So the more you shoot things, the better at shooting you get. The more you jump around, the higher you can jump, the faster you can run, all that kind of stuff. But we knew the player at the start was going to be relatively weak. So what you don't want to do at the very start is put them in a fight with a really powerful character. So the whole boss fight was taught to teach you you're taking damage, go and find some cover or run away to recover. You can pick up new weapons, which makes it easy to kill him. If you spend more time in the tutorial, it actually gets easier when you get there. And occasionally, I think if you die, it kind of encourages you to go like, you sure you're hard enough? Go on level up.
Pick some more of those orbs up.
Yeah, go and get some orbs. And so, you know, it was meant to teach you some mechanics before we throw you through the doors. Because as soon as you go through the doors, all of a sudden, you're massive amounts of freedom. You can go anywhere you like. You literally can go anywhere, left, right, up, down, straight, forward. And it's for you then to explore that world, but we felt we need to make sure before you went out there, you at least knew how to fire the gun, how to jump, what you're supposed to be doing. And that boss fight's designed to bring all the things you learned in the tutorial together before going, oh, okay, if you've passed the boss, now we know you've reached a certain level, off you go.
That's really well explained, thank you. And now we're in a...
We're watching the cutscene now, because I ain't seen this for a while.
We're into it now.
That's the voice of the agency, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Who you never see, you only ever hear.
Like Inspector Gadget.
Is he a good guy?
Doubtful.
Hang on. Is this
If I'm allowed to throw cars around to get the job done, it's doubtful that I'm out. He's a good guy.
So earlier you kind of alluded to the fact that obviously Crackdown 3 is the third one in the franchise. You know, how do you go about incorporating the other games in the franchise? Do you incorporate the other games in the franchise? What's like the process in terms of like, okay, we've got this whole, this is the third game. How do you kind of make it look and sound like a Crackdown game?
I think the agents would be the main factor, biggest part of the DNA that we brought forward. Narrative-wise, vision-wise. We couldn't really make the game without those guys. And the other thing that we would need to do is bring across the bombastic fun of the original games, the explosions and the physics. So we knew those were the two main things. And then there were other elements like the Shy Gen, all of these gangs that were in the original one that we didn't know if we would bring through. So that's what we started experimenting with at the very start. Like, do we need the Shy Gen? Do we need the Volk? And we tried playing around with all those different guys, got very good results. We ended up with these guys as being our final ones because it worked better with our overall narrative and a lot of the things that we wanted to do with the gameplay. We wanted a gameplay that was based around interactions, and that made more sense with guys that are electronics based or chemical based. So we rewrote and reimagined what those guys would be.
So yeah, the original game was basically gangs fighting and vying for control of a city. You know, you got like you were saying, the Volk and the Triads and all that kind of stuff kind of kicking off. Because in that game you were a superpowered agent, you were kind of a crime fighter, and your job was to wipe out the bad guys, wipe out the gangs. That's great, and it brought in a set of core kind of game mechanics, which is the more you do something, the more powerful you can get. It's sort of like a very approachable, easy to access RPG. But when they went to the sequel, they brought in the kind of zombies as well, and that felt at odds because when it went to nighttime, you're fighting zombies versus the gang, and like you're going, well, surely everyone should be fighting the zombies. That's a bit kind of weird. So we looked at that stuff and thought, well, maybe we bring some of that stuff forwards, and then we went, well, hang on a minute, but at the end of the game, you were like this super powerful agent, so surely you're now more than equipped to take out the bad guys, and so you have to kind of go narratively, we kind of need a bit of a reset. So the reset was, it's like, well, there's some kind of event in the world which basically effectively wipes the agency out and reduces the numbers of the agents who are left. And then the remaining agent ends up losing all their powers for reasons. There's always like a reason. It's like Metroid, the guy at the start Samus always loses all her powers when you play the game. So with this, we kind of went, okay, so there's this bunch of bad guys who've created this blackout which has wiped out the agency. And they've basically affected the rest of the world, but they've got this island which they've got under their complete control, and their plan is to basically build from this island and spread out with world domination, I believe is the typical
I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it.
And so then when you've got them, nice, a little bit of a flip.
Oh.
So when you've got that, you go, well, now we've got this reset moment. Now we can almost do what we want. But if they have this island, well, how does that work? Because if they're like an evil gang, they're not fighting each other, they're actually working together. So you've got a branch of the gang which makes weapons, they're the kind of military of the group. Then you've got a branch which makes sure these weapons can be delivered, they're kind of logistics, it's like the DHL of evil guys. And then obviously there's got to be somebody in charge of keeping all that under control, so there's like the executive branch of the evil organisation. And then finally, this island obviously has to have trains which run on time, and it has to have like pipes and gas and extra. So they're the other kind of factions, you've got like industrial faction. And then it's like, well, that means we can have interesting enemies which do different things and can attack you in different ways, which means you've got killed, which means you now need to like attack them in different ways. So we've got gameplay variety we can do. So we wound up there. It still references the great things about Crackdown. You get more powerful. You've got the orbs. The orbs are like a signature thing, and they make a particular sound, and people love hunting them down. Weapons, the idea that you can carry one or two weapons. You actually can carry more weapons than this one you could before, because we won't give you like different ways to play in different combat encounters. So all these things were like an evolution. So we've taken some of what was good, we've added some new elements to it, and we've expanded it out. So we've got space and room to do his own kind of stamp on it.
Yeah, one of the other things that we were really keen on doing was, in the original one, you could climb up just about everything. We wanted to give a little bit more to that, so we've got some ridiculously oversized buildings here that you can get to the top of. You can climb it.
You know you're going to be able to do it.
You can get up there in a car if you try hard enough.
The ones that you are looking at right now, is that can you climb all of those?
You can climb all of those.
If you can see it, you can go there, can't you?
Giant traversal problems to solve. You can shuffle your way up them. You can use all the different routes up there. Yeah, absolutely. That was the goal, to try and stay true to the original.
But you still got the low level stuff. I mean, like at the start of the game, you don't have the ability or the agility to get up there.
Yeah.
So we slowly want you to kind of sort of recapture the island, take it away from the bad guys, and in doing so, you get more and more powerful, which gives you more and more options to take on even tougher and harder bad guys and even taller buildings. So it's constantly like an arms race, isn't it? Basically, between you and the bad guys, to make sure that you're tough enough and strong enough to actually take them out. But what we loved about it is, when we did it, we try and speedrun it. We get the test team, they'd try and finish it as quick as they possibly could. And when it came out, the players found ways to do it even faster than we imagined. So it's like, can you finish the game with like a very basic agent? And some people found like, using the physics or not even exploits, using the game mechanics to do that. I think, what's the record at the minute? It's ridiculous. It's so
It was down to minutes, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, they managed to find a way to do it in minutes by doing this and jumping in this car and then doing this thing and then getting to the top. And when you watch it, it's like mind-blowing. It's like, wow, we didn't expect that. But it's because the game is a toy box that's possible. You look at stuff like Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. It's exactly the same thing. You can reuse the kind of physics and stuff in the environment to achieve things that we didn't think were possible, and the players did fine. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's great fun. I mean, it did cause some limitations when you have that amount of sandbox nature to things and that amount of physics space. It does create restrictions. You can't add quite as much as you would like. At times, the city could be more dense, but that was always going to be the trade-off you have for just being able to, run down this road and pick a car up.
So as a general development team, how do you go about balancing that in terms of kind of player difficulty versus, player difficulty versus, the environment, and making sure that everything's balanced right so that it is just the right level?
It took a while.
It's tricky because you can walk out of the gate at the start after just beating that first boss, Berg, and you can try to make your way right to the top and fight the final boss.
Can you actually?
I don't think you can fight the final boss. I think you need to trigger a few other events, but you can go to any sort of really difficult level in the game and throw yourself into that and get knocked back really harshly. Yeah. So that is a challenge. You do it mostly with geography. You try and lock things behind the agent's abilities, but you only want to do that so much so it's not frustrating, because people always find the exploits anyway, so people can get up to that first building. So that's mostly how we did it from the art department, where we can control the environment a little bit and the terrain. I can hand over to Steve a little bit because you were very closely involved in the design.
I mean, so the design guys, they kind of looked at the map. Imagine you look at the top-down view of the map and they went, right, this is where you come in. So we kind of want to force you to go around the map kind of clockwise and spiral to the top. So we'll make this bit a little bit easier, but this actually quite tough. So you'll naturally go in there and go, oh, I got pretty much beaten up. I'm not going there again. And that's designed to encourage you. The voice of the agency is kind of also, it's almost like an invisible game designer, isn't it? That was something that Dave Johns had kind of said to us previously. They wanted to encourage the player via the voice of the agent. So if the player was doing something good, the voice of the agent is going like, hey agent, good work, keep kicking those bad guys. And if you went somewhere which was a little bit tough, the voice of the agency was like, agent, I don't think you're good enough to be here, you need to level up. And you can use that by going, well, let's see if the player's been killed a lot, let's see if the player's taking on something they shouldn't be doing, and get the voice of the agency to kind of give them feedback, kind of direct them to where they want to go. And again, by laying that out and thinking about where you wanted pockets of difficulty, but also your escalations in difficulty, we can use just the strength of the enemies or the voice of the agency to kind of talk to the player and kind of go, not yet, take your time. But it was tough because, again, you're free to spend your time focusing on whatever abilities you want to do. Some abilities are more useful in combat than others, so agility is good because you can kind of run away faster. But if a player's not leveled that agility up to walk into a tough area, he's going to get killed because he can't run away. Likewise, it's good if you can run away, but then if you're not tough enough to fight, you've got to go and level up firearms so you can actually take the bad guys out. And it's like, so you're constantly going like, well, what if a player comes in and they've never bothered driving? Don't give them a driving challenge, that's kind of nuts. And so Rich has brought the map up now, so we tried to use the map to guide you the things you needed to do. And then we came up with this idea of the supply stations, which is kind of, again, it's the classic kind of Crackdown thing, which is you effectively can take a supply point and take control of an area. Once you've wiped out the bad guys there, then you get that. Anytime you go there, you get restock, you can transmit, it's like a fast travel thing as well. So the player always feels like they're making motion, so they're either leveling up or they're taking control of territory or they're being guided by the voice of the agency what to do. And that kind of pushed them through the game. Quite easy to explain now, took us a long time to work out. But again, like Rich says, the other thing is like density. You know, if you go somewhere there's lots of enemies, you know like, oh, this is going to be a hairy place. But we've always got to have one mind on how well the game runs. You know, one of the things that Microsoft were very, very keen on was it ran at a high frame rate all the time. It has to be running at 60 frames a second, it can't drop. Which was good because we did that, and while the density might not seem that busy to you at the start of the game, it means you can have lots of kind of escalations later on in the game. And when they added the keys to the city, they found they could push the physics way further than we could because we were trying to keep the numbers down, and they could really go to town like throwing things into the game. So it's all a balancing act, and that's much of game development. Is it too easy? Is it too hard? Is it too big? Is it too long? Is it too inscrutable? Are the controls? There's too many buttons. You're always trying to find the perfect blend between the ideal and what feels good.
Mm-hmm. So. And the art team tries to support that. So if something is difficult, it should look difficult. Yeah. So the area that I just ran into is full of giant mechs, and even the lower down guys have got massive hench suits on. So these guys look like they're going to be a handful. So we've got to support that with the visuals. Otherwise, you don't know until you're dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or you tried it about 3 or 4 times and get really frustrated by what's going on, right?
Exactly.
But even death is a lesson, you know, in this game.
I was going to say, is that...
That's a new one for you. Death is a lesson. You could have that.
Dark.
It's grim, isn't it, really? That's getting cut out.
Blooper reel.
Yep.
Blooper reel.
But it is. I mean, the reality is you're free to try anything and go anywhere you want. The game will teach you fairly harshly if you've gone somewhere you shouldn't have gone, and you get basically shown that you're not ready for it, and so it pushes you back. And it's always that push and pull works in these open world games, because you know if you are free to go anywhere, look at any open world game. Things like The Witcher again, you'll feel you've got into an area where it's a bit darker. All of a sudden the fog comes in, or the sun's going down, and you're like,
they're trying to tell me something here.
Hang on a minute. and it's weird because that's like a language for gamers. Gamers get when these things happen, when the music goes quite like, oh, hang on, something's about to happen. So,
or you get like a whole lot of ammunition and
it's like, yeah, why are there all these guns here? What's this? Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fascinating how that language has evolved over time with many video games. It's kind of come through. So again, you take advantage of that, but you've equally got to make sure that people who don't speak that language, you still get something to help them guide them.
We're talking about, you know, Crackdown and stuff. What really appealed to you about Crackdown as you're working on it?
For me, so we have a long history of making racing games. I don't know if you've noticed. People often talk about Outrun 2 or my personal favourite, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed. I think that's the best game we've ever made. There you go. Apart from the most recent one, which we can't talk about. Urgh. So this was a chance for us to put those cars into this game, because Crackdown, one of the skills is driving. So we had to have a whole suite of cars. Mm-hmm. You've got to design cars. And then we had to design, you know, all kinds of cars. You can't have a city which people live in where everyone's got luxurious sports cars. You've got to do little tiny cars. I wanted to put motorbikes and we never quite pulled that off, did we?
Not quite.
Because I'm a biker. But one of the things is we got all those wonderful cars and we could tweak them and make them fast, and we could do things like skid and handling. And they're just the cars that belong to the populace, the kind of, you know, the people who live in the city. Then you've got to design cars for the bad guys, so you can really go to town on those, like the great big APCs and the, like robotic buggies. We had a lot of that. I like how that robot car we come up is it's a bit like a Citroen the Me now. You see one of those.
There we go. There's one.
There we go. So there's all kinds of funny little cars in the game. But the enemy cars are quite interesting. You've got trucks and stuff. But then, like the pinnacle of all the vehicles in the world is the agency vehicle. And that was a lot of fun because all previous Crackdown games have kind of an agency vehicle. And originally what the agency vehicle did is they transformed into like a tougher version depending on your driving ability. But in this we wanted to do something a little bit different. And because we'd done Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing Transformed, have I mentioned that game?
Yep.
I don't think I have.
Fantastic game, that.
Yeah, it's a great game, that. We decided, instead of transforming the vehicles to get tougher, why don't we give you more options with the agency vehicles so it transforms into different things? So you start off with this thing which is like a really fast sports car, and at the start you just drive around fast, and that's kind of interesting. But as you level it up, it effectively, like the Batmobile, becomes tougher, so you can just smash the other cars out of the way. So you just drive down the road and all cars are getting flipped up in the air like some kind of crazy action movie. But that wasn't enough for us. We could have stopped there, but we didn't stop there, did we? So we went,
For some reason.
Yeah, for some reason. So then we did this car, which is like, it's called the spider form.
Yep.
And in one of the original Crackdown games, there was like a bug which allowed cars to stick to walls, and we went, that's actually quite interesting. So this is more like a Dune bug, for want of a better word. But you can make it jump on command, and then also you could orientate it in the air, so you could stick it to the side of buildings. So one of the ways to get through the game quickly is to forget about the shooting and the running about, spend time focusing on the agency vehicle, because that would actually let you get to places you previously couldn't get to. And that might have been enough for some people, Rich, mightn't it?
Might have done.
But it weren't enough for us, was it? No.
No, we needed something bigger.
He says dying
He's
again.
dead. See, if only you got the agency vehicle.
Yep.
So we decided, well, the ultimate form of this thing is surely it becomes like a personal tank. So you can transform it from the speedy car to the car which jumps and sticks to things, the spider form, to the tank form. So eventually, not only can you drive around the streets, get around really quickly, just flipping all the other traffic out of the way and just running over the bad guys, you can also use like a remote control bomb, just launch it at things. But eventually it became a tank. So you could drive around, get to a building, drive up the building, get to the boss, convert it into a tank, and then blow the boss up with a tank, which is a perfectly valid tactic. Nobody seems to have ever cottoned on to.
Yeah.
But it's normally what I do when I play all the way through the game. I found it the quickest way. So I had so much fun with that, and I was involved with the designers and the conversation with Microsoft, and that for me is still the highlight of this game for me. So yeah, the vehicles, the agency vehicle.
Fantastic. And is that what you enjoy the most when playing this game?
Driving around like a lunatic. Yeah, it says a lot about me like that, doesn't it? but yeah, I guess. I mean, I enjoy all the other facets. Don't think I don't. But that's the one I naturally kind of gravitated to because I was such a part of making it happen. And you know, I was but one person. I think you ended up doing how many concepts for that card over the years?
Oh, I think it was Simon that did the vast majority of them. But working with Pua Simon on those cars was probably a year's worth of work in total, just to get to the final concept. It was worth it though in the end, and it did look fantastic. I think my personal favourite when playing the game is still, I don't know, I've gone completely blank.
Still,
I knew what I was going to say.
Still all of it.
When you were talking about the cars, I knew what I wanted to say. No, it's on me.
The bad guys?
No, I think it was the weapons. So,
Oh man.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Hang on, is this another death? No.
Of course it is.
Well, I think we're.
It's a lesson.
It is another lesson.
You should pay attention to what he's doing.
oh, what's
There
that
we
car?
go.
I think we're at 5 now for you.
Are you counting my deaths? It's at least 5.
Absolutely not.
And he's softening it up for me. So by the time I get to it, I don't want to play.
Well, maybe we'll have a separate counter for you,
We start again. I'll do it from the beginning.
Yeah, fair enough.
and then we can have like kill counters, death counters.
I really enjoyed the weapons because we started out with all the obvious stuff like the carbine and the pistols, but we went crazy and we had like things like a black hole grenade. We had a weapon where you could attach other characters to other characters and send them flying off. Absolute mayhem was caused with the type of weapons that we created, and I got to have a lot of fun designing the concepts and the VFX and working with the team there. And it was always just trying to outdo the last one we came up with. So one of them was the black hole gun. You'd attach it to a car. It would then collect all the other little physics objects that were around it until it was a critical
Bins,
mass,
crates.
and then it would explode. Absolute chaos, absolute bombastic fun. I think that was probably my favourite of all of it.
I love that, but that tether gun, like you said, when that first went in, because we'd done it as a hack just to see if we could make it work, and you could stick anything to anything, but we had to kind of tone it down because it was like just vastly overpowered. So you could like stick 8 cars together and then like drive one of the cars and drag them all down the road, and sort of like it'd break after so much and just launch them all into the enemies. But it was
Come back a massive bowling ball.
Yeah, like snap, and then just watch them all go flying down the road, and you're like, oh dear, and then boom, 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 boom. Knackered the frame rate a bit at one point.
It did. It was a bit indie game in approach, but oh my, it was so fun, so much fun.
So you're saying the black hole was your favourite gun to design?
Maybe not visually, but the VFX and how it played out was easily my favourite.
So what was your favourite, like art-wise?
I think my favourite thing was to design the bosses. I really like character design, and because we'd decided we wouldn't do the Volk, we wouldn't do the Shy Gen, we had to start from scratch. So it's always fun to start working on not on IP territory, but new ideas, really new ideas, coming up with who they would be. So spending time working with the designers, working in their requirements for the chemical guy, the one that runs the military, and building up what the visuals of those would be. That was fantastic, and leaning on archetypes for what something might look like. So for the military, we lent on like kind of communist sort of ideology, not ideologies, but ideas and visuals. Pulled out as much military visuals as we could and used that to incorporate it into our characters. Obviously with the chemical faction, we basically just took what it would look like if somebody was made out of a gas canister and applied that to the drones, applied that to the massive Goliaths that stomped around the place. That was just a lot of fun. Just being let loose with this toy box of a land and coming up with ideas for what the characters might be.
And I love that stuff because again, you've got to make sure the weak enemies are weak, so you get like a progression in scale. And when we first did that kind of walking tractor, I don't know, when we got like a load lifter, and you just take one look at that and go like, I would not go anywhere near that in real life. Like that thing's dangerous. It's like a piece of industrial machinery. And then that was just the mid-level. You still had to go up from there. And so you kind of got the freedom to create anything you do. And like you said, one of the fun things about them is each faction has to be visually different, like tonally different. It's the way they look, the way they move, the attitude they express, the sound design. You really got to kind of sell that. So all these things come together and do the kind of finished article. So as a player, you read it and understand, oh, okay, maybe I don't go and poke the bear. And it's mad how much effort goes into that people just don't realise, I think.
Yeah, and all of the graphic design that we did around the island to sell these different factions that were kind of in the idea was they all worked underneath the top boss, but they were all vying for it, like they were all vying for power underneath that top boss, and they had their own little fiefdoms. So it was a lot of fun, sort of trying to like map their almost. I'm gonna get killed again whilst I'm talking. To try and map their, for want of a better word, gang mark on these different islands. So you've got the industrial people, you've got the military people that have got their own visual language, that they've got their own graffiti, they've got their own graphics everywhere. Yeah.
They scream in different ways when you shoot them as well.
That's true.
Do they?
Oh God, yeah.
And getting in a little
one.
one.
Yeah, you've got, most taking the bad guys, right? You've got to get some kind of pleasure. It's wrong, isn't it?
Did you take some kind of pleasure from killing enemies?
Well, I'm not saying video games are all about violence and mayhem and murder, but in this game it kind of is.
A lot of accidental mayhem and murder as well.
As being proved right now.
Well, again, if you think about kind of a lot of our kind of back catalogue, we never really done a grown-up game before, had we?
No, not at all. It'd been a lot of working with Sega on very child, family-friendly titles.
So we were a bit out of our comfort zone, and I think we might have had some pent-up issues we've had to express through this game. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. Yeah, we didn't get too bad.
I think.
So all right, you can survive out of a car which falls out. That was one of the interesting challenges actually, because if the car's upside down, how do you get out the door? People don't worry about that in real life. Well, they do worry about it in real life. But
So if you're doing that,
you can't just teleport out of a car in real life. You're kind of like, oh, I'm upside down there.
So you mentioned that for Sumo's kind of back catalogue, this is kind of more grown up than previous games. Was that a challenge at all?
Well, as I said, we're not done. We've done various video games and we've done all kinds of things, so we understand the kind of mechanics of things, but we're not really done like a game which was effectively an 18 rated game at the time. It's designed, Crackdown is kind of silly comedy, comic violence, so we're kind of okay with that. You know, there's not splatters of blood and limbs coming off, thankfully. That would have been hard work, especially if we spent so much time on the ragdolls. Yeah. But, you know, it was a challenge for us to kind of adopt to that because we were kind of used to playing it safe. You know, if you think about the kind of cuddliness of Sackboy, or you think about kind of the stuff we've done with the Sonic games, we're not really let loose before. And so, ironically, at the start, one of the things we found kind of tricky was going like, well, how far do we push it? How far is it before it's like it can be seen as kind of comedy knockabout, cartoon violence? Or, you know, at what point does it go past that line and starts becoming something not offensive, but you know, it starts to become a bit more kind of challenging, and you go like, yeah, that's okay, it was fun for a bit, but now it's gone a little bit over the top. And so we did spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, the kind of noises that they make when they die. It's like, it's always overblown, like, I've been hit, or, you know, he's shooting me in the face, that kind of like ridiculousness, which really probably isn't, you know, that offensive, as opposed to like, I've eventually died, you know, and like it being...
We tend to err on the side of theatricality and comic book depictions of violence rather than cinematic or realistic. And that was helpful because we knew we could push for the impact. You always want a lot of impact when the violence or the bombastic explosions happen.
Yeah. Did you blow the car up? Good work.
On purpose.
Running around on fire now.
So you want that impact, but you don't want the visceral horror of like a game that would be a true 18. So we just lent into that comic book horror, comic book violence a lot, which just let us get away with a whole lot more.
And that inspired a bunch of stuff. Not only the look of the game, that kind of like bright, colourful, vibrant stuff, to kind of step away from that, so it feels more comic book. And it's also like movie physics, isn't it? You know, that you start blowing cars and flipping cars up. There's nobody like crawling out of a damaged car. The car just blow up and then there's nobody there. You know, you can cheat and get rid of some of the horror.
Of course, yeah.
And what was that like with the art style? So, you know, with the concept art, and did that mean that you could really kind of lean into, like you said, lean into that theatricality and...
Exactly, yeah. So even if you just take the weapons, for instance, Terry Crews is a big dude, but there's no way you're running around with a gun this massive. So everything was overblown. We applied that sort of filter of comic book aesthetic to everything. Whether it's the world building in which you've got no guardrails, which was kind of a requirement that came from design, but we just lent into everything. We didn't try to over-explain things. We placed the world in this sort of squint view comic book world where you just get away with things that you wouldn't in the real world. Massive buildings that have got no ledges, so if you just walk to the edge of them, you would fall off. The density of, like, you've got villains right next to other villains. The type of thing that you wouldn't have in the real world, where you've got these two people who are stood right next to each other and haven't yet kicked off and caused a fight. One of the challenging elements was the propaganda that we placed everywhere and getting the tone right on that, which we didn't always get right. Sometimes it came across as really harsh. So we play into the idea of this is the boss, and she was like essentially bribing people to work and all the rest of it. So all of those black humor style jokes, that was a lot trickier for us, and we did have to work with Microsoft and the writers to sort of balance that out, because there's a lot of concept artists that's got a lot of pent up issues going on, and so we would end up in quite a lot of hot water if we just left it as it was. But that was challenging as well as being really fun.
I mean, there were various things we did on the signs, like, for example, one of the signs, and I completely innocently, was Teresa's Food Bank, which was, you know, you could take it as Mother Teresa. I believe that's what we had in mind, weren't it?
Yeah, it certainly had nothing to do with anybody from the Conservative Party?
No, absolutely
That was a
nothing at
coincidence?
all. Yeah, we definitely didn't think that at all. There was no political commentary in there at all.
I'd forgotten about that because it didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen, did it? No, it didn't happen.
Right, I think it's time to swap.
Do you
want to sit here? So we're here, we've swapped. Steve is now playing Crackdown 3, and we're now going to be talking a bit more to Rich and exploring a little bit more of Rich's experience with Crackdown 3. So obviously you were concept artist and then art director. So kind of, could you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day would be?
So when I was concept artist, I'd work with the other 3 concept artists that we had, and worked really closely with the design team to sort of flesh out the world. So we had a whole list of things that we needed to do, from the weapons to the environments, that all needed to be visualized before they could be built. The reason we would do that is just to test it, really, test it visually. So you would create the concept work. Part of it is to sell the idea, designer or coder. Somebody has a really solid idea that they want to get into the game. The concept can be a really pivotal part of selling that idea. So we have to make it look pretty, obviously, but it also shows us, will it work? Will it work in the game? So a lot of the time, something just won't fit, and it's really hard to take a written design or a brief and understand that. You need that sketch for people to really engage with the idea and dive into it and go, oh, actually, this would be better if you, for instance, if it's a gun, if it felt heavier because this really packs a punch, or it's lighter, and that type of thing. So that would be the vast majority of our day-to-day. Then reviewing that work with the designers, reviewing it with the artists, making sure that they can actually build it. So for weapons, for instance, we always wanted to make the guns bigger. That would run into problems with the animation team, where it would clip, it would penetrate through the body. So we'd do a lot of back and forth, a lot of making sure that our wild ideas could be realised in game.
Was there anything that worked in theory but didn't quite work when it got into the game?
That's a good one.
It's and that's one of the strengths of the concepts, though, because the concepts help everybody. One of the tough things on a game is communication. If somebody's got an idea in their head, it might be the best idea in the world. If they can't communicate that to others and explain what they want out of things, you need concept art to help do that as much of a design. If you write something down, everybody will read it ever so slightly different. But if you show somebody a picture and it sells it, that's what helps people understand what the game is.
Yeah, essentially, we are the part of the process that stops that happening, and that's maybe why I'm struggling to come up with an instance where it's like, great idea, but we can't pull it off. Because, to Steve's point, unless there's a sketch there, half the people won't even think about it. They'll be just like, oh yeah, that'll be fine. So starting with that concept and showing what it is as well as selling it, it essentially resolves a lot of those issues. Yeah.
Was there something where it was the other way around, for example, where it was something that people weren't too sure of that then worked with a concept?
I've got a feeling there was a lot of flying creatures that we didn't really feel would work, and we weren't sure how we would pull them off. So these weren't creatures, they weren't the dragons, they were flying drones. I've got a feeling that we weren't 100% sure if they would work, and that had to be resolved in concept because we were fairly limited with what we could do. I seem to remember having discussions around that.
The robots cause a lot of trouble because we kind of got this idea, like we wanted to try and share kind of rigs, and not animation necessarily, but making sure we could make a robotic enemy, but without having to do lots of complicated different animations or to make them three-legged, for example. You want a tripod element. So we spent a lot of time going like, well, hang on a minute, let's try and keep them bipedal like the humans. Yeah. Maybe we can then share tech because we got a ragdoll and we don't want to explode in different ways. But then when they die, then they can blow up and it can be something unique. But trying to make human-looking robots which read as robots, yep. I remember you had all kinds of grief with the arms, trying to make it look readable because you wanted to be wires and stuff, but then you couldn't read them at a distance. You have to be able to sub-target arms and things, so we needed to have elements like that because that's one of the game tropes. Those took ages, and again, the flying versions of those were even worse.
Oh God, yeah.
Flying versions?
Steve, you'll have to tell me about the flying versions. I don't remember the flying
versions.
Well,
and that's the point. We had enemies on the ground, we had enemies in vehicles, we had stuff, we want to have enemies in the air. So if you ever, because one of the things you've got is, if you've got people on foot or vehicles, that's great when you're at ground level. But if you ever get up high, unless the enemies were already there, how would you get enemies to the player? So the player's not just sat there going, I'm up here, you can't get me, you know, kind of giving them the grief. So you needed some kind of flying enemies to do it. But then flying enemies are challenging for players sometimes because of the 3D nature that they're traversing through the environment. They've got to be big enough so you can see them and deal with them, but not so big that they're an easy target. So you can just kind of just shoot anywhere and they get blown up. And so the scale of that and the way they looked and the way they moved was like quite a fair chunk of work.
Yeah, I do remember those, like, because it was kind of before drones were used in warfare. So we were essentially designing the type of thing that we're a bit more familiar with now. And they were kind of the size of a bike. You never got your bikes in the end, but we did have these bite-sized flying things in the air to try and resolve that issue.
Fantastic, thank you.
Bikes.
Flying bikes.
It's the future, isn't it? You know, let's be honest.
As a concept artist, is lighting something that you ever deal with?
It's definitely part of it. It's starting to stray over into the art direction role. But one of the things as both the art director and the concept artist was to try and light the world in a way that felt appropriate to the source material. So obviously Crackdown was the source material, but we were also looking at the comic landscape as a whole and seeing what we would bring forward. We wanted this really vibrant look for our world. So one of the things we thought we might be able to do, we weren't sure if it would work, is if we had different coloured fog in different areas. My initial thought as an art director and as a concept artist was, they're going to overlay it and we're just going to get this horrible brown fog. So I worked really closely with the technical art director and concept artist to show how that would work. And in the end, it worked out really well. So wherever you are in the world, particularly at night, you have like an atmospheric perspective, a fog that's in the world that just gives you, this haze here, that just gives you a different feel. So even without looking at the architecture and the shape language around you, you know that you're in a different part of the world. And it, like I said, that was something that I thought would be horrible. I thought it would end up brown, soupy mess. It turned out really well, so I was pleased with that. And I was pleased with the support that the technical team gave us to try and make that wacky idea work, because on paper it shouldn't.
Was it something as well that you used to help determine, you know, players, you know, we talked about balancing and about kind of balancing so that players know if they're in a bad place or somewhere that's a bit harder. Is that something you use lighting for?
We definitely used it to try and give a sense of where to move around the map. Lighting's really, really key to that. So we'd light up with visuals and our neon system. We'd light that up as much as possible where we wanted players to go. We had a global illumination system, which held up really well, our global illumination system, but I'll talk about that in a second. But we would usually use these points of interest and the advertisements and the big boards that are everywhere to try and pull you around the island. And they would be using the graphic design and the shape language and the colours that are associated with whichever gang would be in that area. And so you would kind of be able to guess, like, am I ready to go up against the industrial people? Yeah, I can take on them guys, but I can't touch the military guys yet. So you'd be able to tie it in with that. Not lighting per se, but definitely set dressing sort of / lighting.
And you said about the global illumination system. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, that was a tricky one, and it was something that, as a concept artist, I've never touched anything technical in my life before, and Unreal was completely new to me. So that was a massive challenge for me, just to get my head around it. Obviously, I didn't do the work. We had a really talented team to do the work, but being able to explain the ideas, talk through what the visual look I intended was a challenge, and I think it's one that the team really met head on and delivered on really well. So there hadn't been many really good HDR systems that were out there. I think Zelda was perhaps one of the earlier ones that had delivered something really, really well done. So that was our benchmark of something that we wanted to achieve. We also had this vibrant colour fog system that we wanted in it, a big map with a central subject in it. So making all that come together and work cohesively was a massive challenge. And I think towards the end, that's where I spent a lot of my time, working with that really talented team to pull together that HDRI system that really still holds up really well. The lighting is probably something I am quite proud of in this game.
If I say tone mapping watching Twitch.
Yeah.
Go on, that feels like something that
Oh God, I've forgotten half of it, but like, do we use the Acer system? Do we use Unreal's like default system? That was just painful. But the end result speaks for itself. It is really good, so I'm happy with that, and it was worth all those hours spent locked away in a tiny closet with
Scott Simpson.
with the monitor and Scott. Yeah.
Brighter, darker, brighter, darker.
There was more to it
What
than
about
that.
if we do it in the afternoon?
I also included colours, bluer, yellower.
So, you talked about the lighting system. Is that the thing that you feel like you're most proud of in terms of Crackdown 3, or is there other things?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is how the team rallied together when we had to change from being set around the 3 gangs from the original series to suddenly having these 4 new gangs. That was a shocking challenge to overcome in the time period that we had, and I'm so really proud of the concept team and how they responded to that. And to the art team as a whole, the support the design team had for coming up with all of these cool ideas. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I felt from the art side. There were obviously big technical challenges, which other people can speak to, but for me, that was such a hurdle to basically do a massive pre-production job whilst we're in production and pull it off effectively. That was something that everybody involved in that should be really proud of and pleased with themselves over.
I agree with that. It was a lot of hard work to pull that stuff together. And Microsoft were really supportive of it and trying to make sure we got the right people, the right amount of people. There was definitely a time frame pressure. But they kind of stepped up and went and founded support studios to kind of work with the artwork and actually put that stuff in. They helped us offload some of the work on the game on the PC version, so that was done by a different studio to basically take that burden off of us. All that stuff, everybody worked really hard to make it happen, but it was an awful lot of work in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, it looks so different from 3 months before the end and that last sort of drop. Most of the graphics that were in there that were really instrumental in telling the story, bringing it to life, they were all existing as concept, but they hadn't been implemented, and that was really well supported by Microsoft to get that into the game.
So when that kind of stuff happens, how do you as an art team deal with it? What's the things that you do?
Well, after we've kicked off, thrown our toys out the prams, what we do is look at the positives, and that is our favourite part of the job. Coming up with world building and working with narrative to build new ideas is the most fun you'll ever have in concepting. So it's always a lot of fun to be given a gun that you know exactly what the requirements are, make it fit this particular brief, but having a really wide open brief of we don't know what it is yet, but we need these 4 different sets of bosses. They've each got their own little gang that they run. They're going to perhaps have things like mechs, perhaps have flying mechs. They've got their own weapons, they've got their own vehicles. Having a challenge like that kind of gets you over the hump of, but it's a whole lot of work, because that's exciting for a concept artist, that is the world building. And so it didn't take long before the whole team were just really behind it. We started by thinking really broadly, well, what we're going to need to separate it. We need really strong shape language, we need really strong colour, and we need some idea of what the technology is used by each of them. And so we just went really into that. We started with the fundamentals and built outwards from there, working with the narrative team and the designers.
And it's control sometimes as well. I mean, you could use any colour you wanted on any enemy, but if the industrial guys are kind of yellows and greens, they become readable just from that, which again, sometimes these things are fairly simple and obvious, but you have to find it as well, don't you?
And it wasn't as easy as just, we'll use this colour for that.
I know. It sounds like I'm simplifying it, and it really isn't that simple.
In a game with a complex levelling system, people wanted to use all the colours for everything else other than the gangs, so we had to be really careful.
The orbs in neon, the signs in neon, the lighting's neon. It's how does we make things pop out and make things, fall by?
It's a language at the end of the day, and people need to be able to decode that language and know where to go. So we can't speak to them in all of the colours all of the time. We've got to try and find how to message what we need to message.
And how does that process work in terms of being able to message the things that you want to message in art and using colour?
It's a priority system. So we'll start with what's the most important thing that you need to communicate, and that is, that's killing you. Stop doing that. So red's off the table straight away, and again, the shape language would follow with that. You would start there, and then you just work your way down it and you have to work with the designers on this, because you might have really strong narrative ideas, you might have strong visual ideas, but you've got to work with the system of priorities that the design team set out. So we've got this elemental system in this game of electricity and toxic waste, fire, etc. We've got to make sure that all of these things fit in, and no one thing steps over the line in priority than anything else. So it's a hierarchy. You use your primary colours at the top, your most important colours, the ones that have like emotional meaning, like red, fire, blood, etc. You know, that's going to be your danger one. They're not going to let us have green, because we're going to have to use that for health.
Orbs and stuff, yeah.
So we just work through that priority list, and then anything that's left over, like the purples and the teals, we're like, well, we'll have your leftover colours, and we'll build our visual language out of that.
Is that why those bad guys were pink?
Obviously, does that work as well for things like, you said like the industrial, gang were kind of like yellowy green. Does that work for those as well as bringing the colours to the type of enemy they are?
Exactly. So a lot of it is common sense. So if you think industrial, you think of a JCB, you think of like a John Deere tractor, something like that. So you want to use colours that like you emotionally attach a meaning to straight away. And the shapes, so obviously anything that's industrial is going to be bigger, heavier, chunkier, less sleek, less aggressive looking, but really powerful and stout. So that's the approach that we took to things, like almost an emotional response. So with the military stuff, it's darker, harder colours. Everything looks armoured, everything looks made to kill, whether it's like the characters, the guns, the vehicles, everything's made to look like it's there to harm you. So we just stick with those emotional like sets of visual language to sell the narrative.
Oh, I ran myself into trouble.
Oh. You haven't died yet.
No, because unlike him, I spent time leveling up so I can run away.
I didn't need to level up.
Didn't need to level up.
If you need to level up to run away, there's something wrong.
Yeah, but you kept dying.
Let's have a look at the body count at the end of this. Let's see who killed more people.
Are we going on enemy deaths?
Well, I'm not going to go on play deaths, am I?
You might lose on that one. Just a feeling I've got that you might just lose on that one. I think you were at 5. I may be mistaken. Hidden a few from view.
It's all been recorded. The footage won't lie.
Yeah, we can go back and check. You were talking about obviously stuff that you're proud of. Is there something that you weren't proud of at the time, or you weren't quite so keen on, that now you are proud of, and that you look back and you go, actually, I really quite like that, even though I hated it at the time?
I didn't get that question. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I can ask it to you as well.
I'm not doing it.
So I was really concerned that there wasn't enough building variety, particularly in this first area. I thought it felt very samey when we were building it out. But driving through at this speed and looking around, by the time the foliage is in, by the time all of that graphic design's in there, it feels very interesting. Like, I am very surprised. So I'd say that was probably the main thing that I was really massively worried about, that I think I can look back on and go, that's not so bad. That's actually a strength. Like, I know which area I'm in here because of the types of buildings that are here, and they look appropriate.
Is this going to be the first death?
Probably.
Oh no, his shield's coming back.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense though, right? Because I guess when you're kind of looking at it more from a player's perspective and you're doing the driving, it's something that you don't see when you're playing it as an artist.
That's exactly it. So I was used to seeing this. This was one of the first areas that had been built, and I think a lot of what you think about an area or a piece of art from the game is basically based on your first impressions of it, and I think it's really hard to throw that. So even after all the work we did on it, I've still probably got a little bit of emotional like resonance of what I felt when I saw it. It hadn't been fully arted, and the characters weren't in, and the vehicles weren't there. I'm glad to say I don't have that anymore. I really do think this looks pretty solid in terms of the buildings.
I've just got why that's Mr. Booze.
Yeah.
Never noticed that before.
There we go.
We did have fun with those.
So is this something that, you know, is there a big difference from looking at stuff from like an artist perspective to looking at something to how a player might play it?
Oh, definitely. I'm looking at completely different things. As an artist, I'm trying to find all the little ways that I can make the experience feel more immersive, more fun, visually more exciting. And so I don't look in the same way as the player would. The player's trying to get from point A to point B, trying to win the game, and all of those things are secondary. They shouldn't get in the way. So as an artist, I'm looking at all the things that are secondary. I'm trying to design the stuff that you shouldn't see, that should just be part of the background. Like what the characters look like should be secondary to how they're trying to kill you, for instance. So I think there is a completely different way of looking at things when you've got your gamer head on and you've got your artist head on. Artist head on, I'm looking, going, oh, those buildings in the background, they're going to black. Can we boost the fogs in that area so that it separates from the foreground? As an artist, I'm like, as a player, I didn't even notice that. You play the game, you enjoy it, but it's there in the background, and that's why the artist needs to be there to notice these things, so that the things that you would feel as a player that you wouldn't be able to put your finger on and go, that's the issue, that they're not there anymore, they're not getting in the way.
How easy is it to switch between the two perspectives? How easy do you find it?
Almost impossible with a game that I'm making. Hindsight, at a bit of distance is probably the only thing that can do that. In terms of playing other games, like I could quite easily go home at night and play a game and not look at it with artist's eyes. It's almost one of those things, once you switch it on, once you start thinking, oh, I wonder how they did that, and then it's hard to turn it back off. So it's turning it off is the harder part for me. So I can still enjoy playing games without looking at everything and trying to figure out how it's done, or why they made certain decisions, or how fantastic the artist is that did that work. But it's super hard with anything that I'm working on currently. Really difficult to separate yourself from it and just play it as a player would see it for the first time.
It's weird because we almost have the other problem. When you're working on a game, it's halfway in progress. You spend time, you test things. And then there's a moment, and you never really notice this, where it's developed enough that you actually stop testing something just works. I'm just going to look at the guns, I'm just going to check this thing out. And you start playing it, and then you forget you were supposed to be testing whatever it turns out to be. And then you go, oh, hang on a minute. And you're like, after now, you're like, I'm playing this. Yeah. And that point, you know you've gone from that slightly broken, janky thing that you're putting together with a team of people into here's a game which is actually now starting to come together.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember how I had a TV set up right next to the kitchen, so everybody would have to walk past me. I also made sure it was a bloody big TV, so people would have to walk past me, and I'd always be playing, and I was there on purpose to see if I could get people to stop and go, oh, that looks great. Or wouldn't it be better if we fixed that? So a lot of little fixes came from coders who would just sit down next to me and we'd have a chat about something. Be it at one point we had headlights that was a single beam that I was told, oh, that's going to be a really tricky challenge to solve. I had Scott come up and sit next to me and go, why is that like that? And we solved it. And that's because we just sat there playing the game. Sort of in that liminal zone between like, are you trying to make it better or are you trying to enjoy it? And I wasn't sure which I was doing there, to be honest. A bit of both.
Liminal zones, that's quite a big word.
I'm an art director, I need to use the pretentious language.
Oh, I think this might be death number one.
Oh.
Oh, you got Caliban.
I really shouldn't swear in them, I don't know why I feel compelled to do it. I take it personal.
Yeah, I was hoping he was going to get you after you calling me out on my language use.
Yeah, that would have been only fair and just. That would have been, karma, effectively.
So the one thing we haven't spoken about a lot very much is the agents. So how did you go about kind of designing the agents?
Well, we knew we wanted to have them level up in a way, and we wanted the suit to be the driving force behind that. So a big part of it was making this suit that looks inherently like it affects your body in some way, like it affects your DNA. That it's not just I zip this up and I'm done. This is a piece of hardware that changes the physicality of the agent as they're on the move around the island, picking up these orbs. So that was the starting point. The main thing is they've got to look cool whilst they're doing it. So, but they can't look too cool at the start, and they've got to look super cool at the end when you're Terry Crews and you're in the super badass suit. So then the challenge is like just spreading that evenly out during the development of the game. So where Steve's at the moment, he's not quite halfway through yet. I think he's
sort of level 2-ish. So
level 2. So
he's
got
mostly driven by agility.
Yeah, so he's mostly driven by agility. He's not super hench yet, so our characters increase in physicality. They look chunkier, they look thicker. They'll trend towards what the visual aesthetic was like in Crackdown 1. So Crackdown 1, if you remember, the characters were really thick set, really chunky, almost Gears of War-esque in their visual identity. So we started out with them much thinner, and that the reason was to create that contrast between where they start out and where they end up, where they are full-on superheroes diving around this city, doing some superheroic things like chucking cars around, and they would look the part.
So your point as to on agents.
So yeah, we one of the things. Do you know it's always the daft things you have an argument about, and it on games, was why the agents are upgrading them if we ever need to explain it. You know, is it like genetic modification? Is it
the suit?
Is it the suit? Is it the suit? It's not the suit though, is it? The agents get bigger and because they don't want to explain the muscles. So you've got to.
I'm glad you remember.
You won't be like eating lots of sandwiches in between. Like, we've got to fill the suit out. No. But it was mad, weren't it? We were like, is it DNA? And the more we kind of discussed it, the more we decided it was a better idea not to ever explain it. It was just visually, you got bigger and stronger.
That's the comic book way. You don't want to lean too much into explaining it because you'll always leave something on the table that you've forgotten about.
We might rely on that for a sequel. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, they're not really genetically modified. They're all robots. It's like Battlestar Galactica or something. But it was mad because we, like I said, you were right about it. We tried not to make it all about the suit. So the suit, as you get more agile, you get more athletic. As you get stronger, because you're punching things, those two things drive what the agent looks like quite extensively. And so you just change over time based on the things that you're doing. Oh, it's the tower. I've come across the tower. Let's not talk about the towers, is it?
Can you do it? Can you climb it?
I don't know. These always throw me. So yeah, it was a lot of time spent arguing mostly about things like suits. And that sometimes it's always something like that. I don't know what it is. On Transformed, it was like, should the cars mechanically transform or should they just change in a puff of smoke? And hours and hours and hours wasted on trying to work something out, which ultimately we decided was a bad idea and just didn't explain, just visually solved.
And nobody ever asked.
No, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like all that energy and time we spent doing that, and everyone's like, didn't really go like, yeah, they just take it for granted, don't they? Because they like, I play the game, I get bigger. All right, that makes sense, move along. But there was a lot of design that maybe we should have to explain it. It's fascinating what people kind of grasp onto to feel like has a super significance high at these blooming towers.
So we designed the suits to have that range between like right at the start, they look impressive but not super impressive, and then at the end they look super fantastic. They look like really super agent sort of suits. And then Terry Crews comes along, and Terry Crews can't have like just any old suit.
Yeah,
Terry Crews needs his own suit. So this suit had to be special. It had to be even better. So after we'd like balanced it all out and we were really happy with that, we had to go in and come up with like the god level suit for Terry Crews, which was hilarious fun, and I enjoyed it. But that was hard.
But then, just to add insult to injury, because he appears obviously in the introduction to the game, you see Terry as the commander. He's got his special suit as a side effect. Then it was like, we should make him a playable character. But then we went, but that means he has to be like a level 0 agent at some point. So instead of being Terry Crews, this big buff guy everybody knows, we now have skinny Terry Crews.
Did you ever get to meet Terry Crews?
Sadly, I did not. I think Joe and Steve did when they went to...
The recording session, yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was one of the shows in the US. So I think it was Comic-Con. So we went out to Comic-Con to show the game. And Terry came on the stand for that to do kind of part of the announcement and all the rest of it. So they got to meet Terry and smooch with Terry. Smooch? Smooch. That's what I'm looking for. Maybe they did smooch. I mean, I
would
there,
hope so.
But apparently he was a lovely guy. He was really excited. For him, what was interesting, he was in the game and he could see himself in the game. And we took some incitement for that. So if you play as Terry, one of the things Terry does the other agents don't necessarily do is he has one-liners. So if you're playing these when you're shooting the bad guys, it's like Terry goes, hey, I took these guys out. It's just the best thing. And that's like an Easter egg effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't get to meet Terry.
No, absolutely disappointed.
But
it is so strange seeing him as the thinner Terry. Like, you need to get leveled up.
Why to shoot those things? That's why I'm having so much trouble. Oh, well done. There's nothing.
You caught it though.
Well, that's a questionable thing. So these, you were talking earlier about things which were controversial, right? These towers are effectively jumping puzzles. And there was a long time we found these towers kind of really annoying because if you ever fell to the bottom, like I've just done there, which is kind of winds you up, they get taller and higher all the way through the game. And it actually becomes quite demoralising when you've got quite a long way up and then you fall off. So I didn't realise these switches makes it easier. Look, I've actually got a platform to jump to. I should have probably focused on that. And so we spent ages and ages making these towers, and they were too hard, and then they were too easy, and then they were frustrating. And it was just a case of trying to make them interesting and fun jumping puzzles, and to give you a reason for your agility, so you've got better at jumping. These help. Stop on these, you get a ton of XP, which makes you better at jumping, amusingly, to do even more complicated and painful jumping puzzles.
And these were comms towers as well, or something like that? So
yeah, there's a reason you want to capture them. So if you take them over, it basically, instead of sending out the enemy propaganda to the location, it sends out agency propaganda instead. It's like, hey, we're taking over the island. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's the better of the two evils, isn't it? That's what I'm saying. The agency are the good guys. So if I do fall off, which obviously I'm not going to do now, I've remembered how to play this, there is a thing which resets you back to the last level you got to as long as you remember to press the button in time. But yeah, they're quite nice moments, these, because they take you to, oh God, all the tension, places where you get like really good views of the locations. There used to be this annoying like cube thing you had to, at one time you had to pick these up and take them to the top of the tower. Please don't make me have to pick it up to the top of the tower.
No, that should just sink in now.
And now I've captured that tower, but each one of these is kind of a nice moment because we put them in a spot which lets you look at like all the nice scenery we built. Look, there's a bad guy being replaced by, hey there, I'm Terry Crews. And it now introduces the communications division or the logistics division, which one of the bad guys is.
And as controversial as they were really helpful to like drop them in the world and go like, this is another thing that you need to aim for. So it pulled you through the world.
Oh, and I've leveled up. Look at that. So my firearm skills improved as well. So now I can see right across the island from this point. So I can start to think like, okay, what have I missed? Where are the orbs? There's one orb there, tantalising place to make me jump off, so I'm going to fall off effectively. But it's nice because you start seeing Terry Crews turn up, agency things turn up. And more importantly, there's a mechanic in the game where now the populace start to fight back and take down the bad guys. So you see like a civilian militia.
Yeah, you've got your rebel uprising happening.
And those civilian militia will now fight on your behalf and start taking down some of the enemies. And also they turn up if you start killing the population. They're like, oh, that's it. The agency's gone bad. We'll take them out as well. But yeah, a mechanic which was quite frustrating as we did it, but turned out to be pretty good fun. Oh, I ain't got ground pound yet. And my first death.
There we go.
I was trying to demonstrate something cool and I died in the process. So I'll take that one. That's one for the team.
So why was it frustrating? You said it was frustrating. Why?
Did you watch me playing that?
and Steve knows how to do it. So getting up to the top of that tower, the usual experience, if you're not used to it,
I've done it. Oh,
you miss it and you fall and you die. And then you come back and you fall and you die. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do.
And as you level up, you can fall from a lot higher points, so they get taller and taller, more and more peril. But it was like, at first they're just static, and then we put rotating elements, and then there's force fields, and they just got more and more complicated. And it was always trying to find a balance between the satisfaction of getting to the top, but the misery of getting there.
I've spent how many hours trying to do this, and
and you think it's bad now with the final game. Trust me, some of the ones the designers come up with were like just. Do you know? I think
because they were good at it. They could actually control the character to do anything, and they've just thought, oh well, that's the standard level of ability because were used to it. It wasn't the standard.
And you put it in the
standard level. Well, maybe not even me.
QA are like, the ways, what's wrong with you? Like you're going like they're like diabolical. Oh, but there needs to be a challenge. It's like there's been a challenge and there's just been just sheer misery. Oh, there's the civilian militia. Look.
Oh, excellent.
Doing much helping,
not
is he?
firing.
Oh, I like how he jumped out of the way at the last minute. Well done. We did have them quite powerful at one point. The danger of being too powerful is they basically did all the work for you. You'd be basically wandering around the map watching civilians play the game.
watching someone else win the game for you.
It's like, oh, where's the fun in this? It's like they're just doing all the work for me. Let's steal one of their cars.
Well, I think we will end it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time today. It's been lovely having you. Make sure you join us next time where we'll be having a different set of devs and a different game. And we'll be looking at another game in Sumo Digital's back catalogue. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.